as eigle schwiffe irnthe gemunde, saith the weather san woonian shoulder. Chealder streama sithan cain weath to, Edgibanan angan breither feather emer.
Those lines are from the great epic poem Beowulf, composed 12 centuries ago. The lines were spoken in the original Old English, or Anglo-Saxon as it's sometimes called, a language as distinct and foreign as, say, German. Beowulf and the other Old English poems we've included in this program were all composed in England, but much of their material came from the heroic past of the Anglo-Saxon settlers. They often draw on happenings in the ancestral lands of Northern Europe. Much of this poetry was at first orally composed and written down only later. And Old English, in its various dialects, was the language of much of Britain from the 6th century after the final slow collapse of Roman civilization until after the Norman conquest in the year 1066. We've called our series 6 Centuries of Verse, and yet Beowulf, as I've said, goes back 12 centuries. The point is that all the poems in the other 14 programs were written in an English we recognize, or almost recognize today, even Chaucer's Middle English, some of which we'll hear next week. Old English is remote and has to be translated. It is this that went before, far before the 6 centuries of verse which make up our series. Yet we can recognize one kind of poetry, poetry as a game, in the Old English riddle poems. Imagine 2 men sitting by the fire, sometime perhaps in the 7th century, swapping riddles.
I am a lonely being, scarred by swords, wounded by iron, sated with battle deeds, wearied by blades. Often I witness war, perilous fight, nor hope for consolation that any help may rescue me from strife before I perish among fighting men. But hammered swords, hard-edged and grimly sharp, batter me, and the handwork of the smith bites in the castles. I must ever wait a contest yet more cruel. I could never in any habitation find the sort of doctor who could cure my wounds with herbs. But cuts from swords ever increase on me through deadly contest, both by day and night.
That was a shield. All the details fit when you think about them. Here's another one.
My dress is dark, but my adornments bright and glittering, and red among my clothing. I lead astray the stupid, urge the fool to rash adventures. Others I restrain from useful journeys. I have no idea why they, thus mad and having lost their minds, their deeds gone wrong, should glorify to all my wicked ways. For this they shall have grief when the high Lord brings forth the dearest treasure, if they have not then ceased in this bad counsel.
Perhaps that was more difficult. The answer is wine. Something that comes across in these riddle poems is the fact that a poem can be entertaining, and one kind of English humor hasn't changed.
I'm a strange creature, for I satisfy women, a service to the neighbors. No one suffers at my hands except for my slayer. I grow very tall, erect in a bed. I'm hairy underneath. From time to time, a beautiful girl, the brave daughter of some churl, dares to hold me, grips my russet skin, robs me of my head, and puts me in the pantry. At once that girl with plaited hair who has confined me remembers our meeting. Her eye moistens.
That, of course, was an onion, though you may be able to think of another interpretation. The Anglo-Saxons, like their close cousins the Norsemen, were great sailors and explorers. The Norsemen in particular have throughout the centuries been thought of as ferocious seafarers, pirates and plunderers. But one old English poem celebrates the lonely courage of the sailor and looks almost wistfully at the contrast between the cruel beauty of the sea and the boring safety of the dry land. Here is part of that lyrical monologue, The Seafarer.
I sing my own true story, tell my travels, how I have often suffered times of hardship in days of toil, and have experienced bitter anxiety. My troubled home on many a ship has been the heaving waves, where grim night watch has often been my lot at the ship's prow as it beat past the cliffs. Oppressed by cold, my feet were bound by frost in icy bonds, while worries simmered hot about my heart, and hunger from within tore the sea-weary spirit. He knows not, who lives most easily on land, how I have spent my winter on the ice-cold sea, wretched and anxious, in the paths of exile, lacking dear friends, hung round by icicles, while hail flew past in showers. There heard I nothing but the resounding sea, the ice-cold waves. Sometimes I made the song of the wild swan my pleasure, or the gannet's call, the cries of curlews for the missing mirth of men, the singing gull instead of mead in hall. Storms beat the rocky cliffs, and icy-winged the tern replied, the horn-beaked eagle shrieked. No patron had I there who might have soothed my desolate spirit. He can little know who, proud and flushed with wine, has spent his time with all the joys of life among the cities, safe from such fearful venturings, how I have often suffered, weary on the seas. Night shadows darkened, snow came from the north, frost bound the earth, and hail fell on the ground, coldest of corns. And yet the heart's desires incite me now that I myself should go on towering seas among the salt waves play, and constantly the heartfelt wishes urge the spirit to venture, that I should go forth to see the lands of strangers far away. Yet no man in the world so proud of heart, so generous of gifts, so bold in youth, indeed so brave, or with so loyal lord, that he can ever venture on the sea without great fears of what the Lord may bring. His mind dwells not on the harmonious harp, on ring receiving, or the joy of woman, or worldly hopes, or anything at all, but the relentless rolling of the waves. But he who goes to sea must ever yearn. The groves bear blossom, cities grow more bright, the fields adorn themselves, the world speeds up, yet all this urges forth the eager spirit of him who then desires to travel far on the sea paths. Likewise the cuckoo calls with boding voice. The harbinger of summer offers but bitter sorrow in the breast. The man who is blessed with comfort does not know what some then suffer who most widely travel the paths of exile. Even now my heart journeys beyond its confines, and my thoughts over the sea, across the whale's domain, travel afar the regions of the earth, and then come back to me with greed and longing. The cuckoo cries, incites the eager breast onto the whale's roads irresistibly. over the wide expanses of the sea, because the joys of God mean more to me than this dead, transitory life on land.
The Christian faith had established itself substantially throughout Britain by the 7th century, and some of the most moving Old English poems are deeply Christian in their feelings and in their imagery. The potent image of the cross is found in words as well as in objects. The Ruthwell Cross in Scotland carries some of the poem Dream of the Rood, carved in runic characters. Here is part of it, in which the cross on which Christ was crucified is itself heard speaking of the experience.
It was long past, I still remember it, that I was cut down at the copse's end, moved from my roots. Strong enemies there took me, told me to hold aloft their criminals, made me a spectacle. Men carried me upon their shoulders, set me on a hill, a host of enemies there fastened me. And then I saw the Lord of all mankind hasten with eager zeal that he might mount upon me. I durst not against God's word bend down or break when I saw tremble all the surface of the earth. Although I might have struck down all the foes, yet stood I fast. Then the young hero, who was God Almighty, got ready. Resolute and strong in heart, he climbed onto the lofty gallows tree, bold in the sight of many watching men, when he intended to redeem mankind. I trembled as the warrior embraced me, but still I dared not bend down to the earth, fall to the ground. Upright I had to stand, a rood. I was raised up, and I held high the noble king, the Lord of heaven above. I dared not stoop. They pierced me with dark nails. The scars can still be clearly seen on me, the open wounds of malice. Yet might I not harm them. They reviled us both together. I was made wet all over with the blood which poured out from his side after he had sent forth his spirit. And I underwent full many a dire experience on that hill. I saw the God of hosts stretched grimly out. Darkness covered the ruler's corpse with clouds. His shining beauty shadows passed across, black in the darkness. All creation wept, bewailed the king's death. Christ was on the cross.
The longest and most impressive of all the Old English poems is the one with which we began, Beowulf, an epic story of adventure and heroism drawing on the history and legends of the Scandinavian peoples. The plot, briefly, is this. Hrothgar, king of the Danes, builds a splendid hall in which to celebrate his victories. In this hall, called Hjorot, Hrothgar and his followers enjoy themselves in feasting and drinking, until suddenly a terrible monster, Grendel, breaks in at night and carries off 30 of the men and devours them. For 12 years, Grendel continues this ghastly plunder. Hearing of this, a lord of the Geats king, Hygelac, sails from Sweden with his warriors to help Hrothgar. This lord is called Beowulf. We come into the poem partway through, in Julian Glover's own adaptation spoken by him, into which he's cunningly woven bits of the original Old English. At the end, he leaves us in suspense, poised for further dreadful action. But now he takes up the story when Beowulf has arrived at Hjorot. Hrothgar, king of the Danes, has just welcomed him. As the poem puts it, Beowulf then replied with a boasting speech.
I fancy my fighting strength, my performance in combat, at least as greatly as Grendel does his. I therefore shall not foreshorten his life with a slashing sword. Too simple a business. Of good arms he knows nothing, of the shattering of shields. No, we'll at night play without any weapon. if unweaponed he dares to face me in fight. The Father in his wisdom shall apportion the honors then, the all-holy Lord, to whichever he think fit. Then the hero lay down, while about him many brave sea warriors bent to their hall rest, not one of them thinking ever to see again their beloved country. Come on wanre nicht, skriðan Skeduganga. Gliding through the shadows came the walker in the night. The warriors slept, all except one, and this man kept an unblinking watch. He waited, pent heart swelling with anger against his foe. From off the moorland's misting fells came Grendel stalking. Dacker off moor under Misleotham Grendel Gongan. He moved through the dark, saw with perfect clearness the gold-panelled hall, mead drinking place of men. The door gave way at a touch of his hand. Rage inflamed, wreckage bent, he tore the hall's jaws. Hastening onwards, angrily advancing, from his eyes shot a light in unlovely form of fire. He saw in the hall the host of young warriors, and in his heart exulted, horrible monster, all his hopes swelling to a gluttonous meal. He meant to divide, monstrous in frightfulness, the life from each body that lay in that place. As a first step, he set his greedy hand on a sleeping soldier, savagely tore him, gnashed at his bone joints, bolted huge gobbets, sucked at his veins, and had soon eaten all of the man to his fingers and feet. Then he moved forward, reached to seize our warrior Beowulf, stretched out for him with his spite-filled fist. But the faster man, forestalling, rose up upon his arm and quickly gripped that sickening hand. The upholder of evils immediately knew he had not met on Middle-earth's acres with any other man of a harder hand grasp. He strained to be off. He ailed for his darkness, his company of devils, and his den beneath the mere. But Hygelac, great kinsman, recalled his evening's utterance and fastened his hold till fingers burst. The monster strained away. The man moved closer. The monster's desire was for darkness between them, direction regardless, to get out and run for his fen-bordered lair. It was an ill journey that persecutor had of it when he made for Heorot. Fear entered the Danes as they heard through the side wall the grisly plaint of the enemy of God, the sobs of the damned one bewailing his pain. The Geats leapt up to defend their great prince. They were ignorant then that no sword on earth, not the truest of steel, could touch their assailant, for every sword edge and weapon of victory he had blunted by wizardry. It was then that this monster, moved by spite against our race, found in the end flesh and bone were to fail him, for Hygelac's great kinsman, stout-hearted warrior, had him fast by the hand, and hateful to each was the breath of the other. A rip in the giant flesh frame showed then. Shoulder muscles sprang apart, a snapping of tendons, bone locks burst. The arm of the demon was severed from his side, and Grendel flew, death-sick, to his joyless den, where he knew that the end of his life was in sight. Beowulf had cleansed Heorot, saved the hall from persecution. As a signal to all, the hero hung the hand, the arm and torn off shoulder, the entire limb, Grendel's whole grip beneath the soaring roof. Then it was, as I heard it, at hall next morning, warrior with warrior walked to see this ghastly limb. The aethelings gazed at the hand high under ceiling. Each nail socket seemed steel to the eye. Each spur on the hand was a talon of fear.
Of the bright building, just the roof had survived unmarred and in one piece. Along the wide high roads, the chiefs of the clans came, crossed remote tracts to follow the foe's footprints, who, with strength flagging, had staggered to his fen lair, giving up his heathen soul. There, the death-daubed waters, becrimsoned, seethed, gore-hot, and hell engulfed his life in the deep fen pool. Then the clan chiefs wheeled away from the mere in bold mood, joined by the young men, white-mounted warriors. Of Beowulf, many said that over earth's stretch, of all who wielded sword, he was worthiest to rule. Oh, in saying this, they did not slight in the least the gracious Hrothgar, for he was a good king. Ac that was good kuning.
Taking his stand on the steps of the hall, Hrothgar beheld the hand of Grendel, said, Beowulf, I now take you to my bosom as a son. Hold yourself well in this new relation. You shall lack nothing that lies in my gift. May the Almighty Father grant you always the success that on your own account you have guaranteed in deeds. Then Beowulf spoke, son of Ecgtheow. I had meant to catch him, clamp him in a lockhold, and I clung to him too loosely to prevent his escape. But now he lives no longer, is forced to await till the Lord in his splendor shall pass his great decree. Then, as a sign of victory, Hrothgar, son of Healfdene, presented to Beowulf a sword worked in gold, and onto the floor had brought on 8 war horses with glancing bridles, one with a saddle studded with stones, battle seat of the Danes. He bade also compensation to be made, again in gold, for the men whom Grendel had horribly murdered. What a banquet then was! Gladness mounted, bench mirth rang, the bearers poured out wine from wonderful vessels. Leoth was a sungen, Gleam manas gid, Gamen eftastach, Beoch to the Benksweg, Burlasse aldan wien of wunderfatum. When the evening came, they cleared away the benches, covered the floor with beds and bolsters. The Geats laying by their heads their polished shields, their lindens of battle, always ready for war. What a nation they were. Then they sank into sleep.
But it was soon made clear a survivor was still living, another foe grieving, ailing for its loss. Ides eigleshwiffe ernfthe gemunde, saith the wedre gesan wunian shoulder, chealde streamas sithan cain weath to, edgibanan angan breder feather emer. In the chilling currents, dwelling in dread waters, the monstrous ogress, Grendel's mother,